Okay, so Georgia and the 13 colonies are fresh out of the American Revolutionary War. The colonists have declared that they no longer want to be a part of Great Britain. So they have declared their independence by creating and signing the Declaration of Independence. They have fought the American Revolutionary War. They have gotten a system of government that they first got, the Articles of Confederation. They have worked out some of the kinks. So finally, they think now that Britain should not be the only people who have an educational system. So now we're going to delve into the westward expansion. We're going to go and start into our history standard number 4. And as we talk about the westward expansion, we're going to start talking about explaining reasons for the establishment of the University of Georgia and for the westward movement of Georgia's capitals. That is the first standard that we're going to work on today. We're going to work on H4A, explain significant factors that affected westward expansion in Georgia between 1789 and 1840. So, University of Georgia. Great Britain already had great universities. They had very educated men who came over from Great Britain, who helped us start the colonies, who helped us start Georgia. James Oglethorpe was a very educated man. Many of the people who came over and graduated from Yale. So we felt like in Georgia that we needed to have an educational system as well. After the American Revolution, Georgia's leaders became increasingly interested in education. Georgia's General Assembly set aside 40,000 acres of land for the University of Georgia in 1784. Then, in 1785, Abraham Baldwin wrote the school's charter, saying that all people, not just the wealthy people, have a right to get an education. UGA was the first state-supported university in the United States. It set the example for America's current system of public colleges and universities. Here you see as you walk onto the campus of the University of Georgia, it says that it was endowed with 40,000 acres, and it gives you a little background about how the University of Georgia started. You'll notice that on the seal it says 1776. However, the charter for the University of Georgia was actually signed or written in 1785. The school's trustees named Abraham Baldwin as the first president, and the university's construction began in 1801 when the future governor, John Milledge, donated land on the Oconee River to the school. You'll notice that the Georgia Bulldogs, their current mascot is a bulldog. That gives you an aerial view of their stadium. They just had a very important game against Georgia Tech last weekend, and they have another important game coming up against Alabama. Originally called Franklin College in honor of Benjamin Franklin, it ultimately became the University of Georgia and opened its doors in 1801. It's located in Athens, Georgia, and it has expanded in size and academic reputation over the past 130 years. In the early 1900s, new schools of learning opened within the university, such as pharmacy, education, business, and journalism. Women were finally allowed to attend the university in 1918. In 1961, UGA was integrated with Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes became the first African American students who actually enrolled. An important note is that although they were the first people who enrolled, they were not the first people who graduated. Another young lady was actually the first person who graduated. There's also a back and forth that goes between the University of Georgia and the University of North Carolina because the University of North Carolina actually held their classes first. So they say that they were the first university or the first institution in the United States who was actually a university or a school. But Georgia got its charter first. Now, Atlanta has not always been Georgia's state capital. There is a acronym that we use to talk about Georgia's capital. That acronym is SALMA, SALMA. It is an acronym that we use to talk about the capitals of Georgia, which were Savannah, Augusta, Louisville, Milledgeville, and Atlanta. Salma, Salma. Georgia's very first capital was located in Savannah. However, as more and more Georgians moved westward, the location became increasingly inconvenient. It would make sense that the first capital was located in Savannah, since when people first came over, they used Savannah as a port, and it was near water and it was near things. So people wanted to be able to move around. And as you remember, when we talked about the geography of Georgia, one of the things that we talked about was how important water was, because they didn't just use water for simple things like to drink. It was a source of food, it was a source of transportation, it was a source of bordering and moving things from one place to another. So water was very important. So they wanted to kind of sort of make sure that wherever they moved the state capital, they were always near water because of the vast resources. I could go fishing near water. I could move from place to place near water. I could ship things near water. So they wanted to kind of sort of make sure that they stayed around water. In 1785, the state capital moved to Augusta. Salma, Salma. First it was Savannah, then they moved to Augusta. Many Georgians were still unhappy with the location as the population was spreading toward the center of the state. People started to move westward. If you remember, when we talked about the French and Indian War, one of the things from the French and Indian War was the proclamation of 1763 that says nobody can move west of the Appalachian Mountains. So now that we have gained our independence, we're starting to move west, and it was called the Westward Expansion. So as we go, we started in Savannah, Salma. Now the A, we're in Augusta, but we're still unhappy. Georgia's citizens called for a new state capital with a central location that would be more accessible for all Georgians. The state legislature commissioned a group to find a location further west. In 1786, the General Assembly named a site near an Indian trading post on the Ogeechee River as the new state capital. The capital of Louisville was named to honor Francis King Louis XVI for his support during the American Revolution. The Ogeechee River made water transportation convenient to and from Louisville. Also, the Indian Trading Post helped Georgia's legislature to better address Indian activities on the frontier. Wherever they moved the capital, they tried to stay somewhere near where there was some water. This shows where Louisville is. We remember we started over in Savannah. Now we have moved up a little bit westward into Louisville. Even though the site was selected, it took over 10 years for the government to move there in 1796. Once developed, Louisville was successful both socially and financially. Louisville's time as capital ended in 1807 for several reasons, including the fact that they had some malaria outbreaks that occurred in the city every year. There was difficulty of using the Ogeechee River as a trade route, and more importantly, the continual northwestern movement of Georgia's population. People kept moving west, and they kept moving west. One of the most famous events of Louisville was when the state legislatures publicly set fire to the Yazoo Land Act with a magnifying glass. And we're going to talk about the Yazoo Land Act later. Now, This place still stands in Louisville. It was built in the 1790s and it was a general marketplace for the city. It's where people all gathered together to buy and sell and trade and things like that. So as we keep going, SALMA, it is the acronym that we use for the capitals of Georgia. Savannah was the very first capital. Savannah was the capital that we founded, and it served as the colonial capital of Georgia. It was maintained by the trustees of Georgia, and it was deemed the seat of government for Georgia after the state constitution in 1777. A was Augusta. The capital moved to Augusta. We still wanted to be near some water, so then we moved that capital to Louisville, SAL. Now we're going to move the capital to Milledgeville. Eventually, northwestern expansion of Georgia's population and an outbreak of malaria in Louisville caused state officials to move the capital again in 1807 to Milledgeville. Milledgeville was named for the governor John Milledge and served as the state capital for 61 years. So we talked about the Creek Indians. The Creek lands that were west of Louisville were ceded to the state in 1802. And without delay, the push to move the state westward was underway. They were ready to move again, which is how we came to Milledgeville. Once the Cherokee Indians had been removed from the state, legislatures began pushing for another westward movement of the capital. The town of Terminus, now we call that town Atlanta, was chosen because of its railroad accessibility. We're going to talk about how important railroads were to the advancement and the westward expansion. In 1868, Georgia's state capital moved to where it is now, its final capital, Atlanta, SALMA, Savannah, Augusta, Louisville, Milledgeville, and now Atlanta. This is a picture of the state capital as it looks today, down in Atlanta. Over time, Georgia's state capitals moved to follow the center of the state's population in order to be accessible to all citizens. There have been 5 cities that have served as Georgia's state capital: Savannah, Augusta, Louisville, Milledgeville, and Atlanta. SALMA. The next version, we'll start talking about land policies and how people determined what land you would live on and where you would live after the American Revolutionary War. Because after the war, some people had land, some people had no land. So they tried to develop ways that we could, I don't want to say fairly, but that we could distribute this land amongst other people.